time? That's a little awkward. Well, let me introduce myself. My name's Detective Mara Salfer, and I was recently assigned a case to solve the 3 mysteries found right here in Schmeeckle Reserve. Most of us may think that we know every landscape and trail that Schmeeckle Reserve has to offer, but through a closer investigation, we will be able to uncover the mysteries behind the oddities left by those who came before us. I've been working as a Schmeeckle Reserve detective for the past 3 years, and throughout those years, I have gathered a lot of evidence, and I've even found a few clues that I haven't been able to solve yet, and I'll need your help solving them. So instead of just sitting there, why don't you help me look through my evidence and help me solve my clues? I have 3 clues that I need help solving, and I'll need 3 volunteers to hold on to each clue and read them aloud when I need them to be read. Does anyone want to volunteer to hold on and read a clue for us? Would you like me to hold on to and read them for us? Okay. Would anyone else like a clue? Now, even though I haven't been able to solve these clues yet, I've gathered a lot of evidence that leads me to believe where these oddities might be found. So before we head to our first spot, would we be able to read clue number 1? She said she loses against paper, but wins against scissors. What am I? So as we walk to our first location, I want you to think about that clue and see if you can solve it. We've made it to our first stop, and was anyone able to solve the first clue?
Could we hear it again?
Yeah. Can we read the first clue again?
I lose against paper, but win against scissors.
A rock? A rock. A rock, that's it. When we think of farming, we typically think of rows of crops, maybe dairy cattle, but here in Schmeeckle Reserve, we think of unusual rock piles and forgotten equipment. When I first started working as a Schmeeckle Reserve detective, I saw this rock pile and I thought it must have been left by glaciers, because glaciers tend to leave rocks when they move. To investigate this thought, I looked at the glacial records and saw that glaciers didn't even make it to Stevens Point. They were too far north and to the east of us. So they couldn't have been left by glaciers. They also look like they're piled pretty perfectly. I don't think a glacier could do that either. So I thought, maybe humans left them. So I started looking into that thought a little more and looked at the land ownership records and saw that farmers used to own the land that Schmeeckle Reserve is today. But there's something different about Schmeeckle Reserve compared to farms. How many of you have been on a farm or lived on a farm? What's different about Schmeeckle Reserve compared to that farm you saw?
It's too marshy.
Exactly, it's too marshy. The area we're standing in, there's wetlands behind me, there's some wetlands over there, wetlands everywhere. So they couldn't have farmed traditional crops like corn or wheat. So I thought maybe they could use it for livestock. I looked into that as well, and I found this newspaper article from the Stevens Point Journal, 1878, and it talks about the Meadow Farm Dairy, which was a dairy farm located right here in Schmeeckle Reserve. That wasn't the only piece of evidence I found that pointed to Schmeeckle Reserve being used for livestock. The second piece of evidence I uncovered was this lower jawbone. Does anyone know what animal this bone came from?
Pig.
A pig.
A pig, yes. This was found near the Schmeeckle Reserve Visitor Center, which used to be an old farmhouse before we renovated it. So this also tells me that livestock was in this area. But just as I thought my investigation was going really well, I stumbled upon another piece of evidence that threw me for a loop. Before I show you this last piece of evidence, I want to let you know that we're going to be walking off trail for a very short distance. So if you don't feel comfortable walking off trail, I can show you a picture and I'll lead everyone to that spot and then we'll meet back here and talk about it more. But if you're ready, I'll take you there now. I want to watch the step right there. Yeah.
Oh! There it is. Yep. It's been there a few years.
Yeah.
For those of you that have been on a farm before, has anyone seen a piece of equipment like this, or maybe know what it's called or what it was used for?
Yeah.
Have you seen it?
I've seen them.
Yeah, so this piece of equipment is called a spring-tooth harrow, and similar to a plow, is drugged behind, helps loosen up some soil. So this was the third piece of evidence I found. We'll head back to the main trail and talk about it a little more.
No, I didn't know.
No? Didn't you?
I pretty much stayed in the past just because.
Yeah.
Now, like I said, when I found that spring-tooth harrow, it threw me for a loop. I saw it and I thought, this had so much evidence that pointed to this area being used for livestock like dairy cattle and pigs. But seeing that spring-tooth harrow and this rock pile tells me that in certain areas of Schmeeckle Reserve, the areas that aren't the wetlands we talked about, could have been used for traditional crop farming. I think it just solved our first mystery, our first oddity, that these rock piles aren't just some strange rock pile, they're remnants of farming. But before we get too excited, we still have two more oddities left to solve. Before we walk to our next location, can we read the second clue out loud? And we have some people running too, so we might need to move aside.
Give me food and I will live. Give me water and I will die. What am I?
Let's see where it brings us. We've made it to our second oddity location. Would you be able to read our clue one more time?
Give me food and I will live. Give me water and I will die. What am I?
Was anyone able to solve this clue? It really stumped me. Like I said, I've been working at this for 3 years, and still I didn't even solve that one. No thoughts on this. Let me look around.
Could it be the number of trees that are dead?
It could have something to do with it. You won't believe what I just found. I found another clue. I think this clue links to that one. So, it goes, give me food and I will live. Give me water and I will die. A spirited jig, it dances bright, banishing all but darkest night. So it's something really bright. We can't put water on it, it'll die. But if we give it food, it'll live.
Oh,
Fire! I don't see any fire here, but it is fire. What in this area looks strange that might have something to do with fire?
Bare ground.
Bare ground, and something even stranger about this ground that I'm standing on is that there's all of these ridges, one after the other. Now, these ridges aren't natural or made by terrestrial forces, but instead by conservation students who were trying to put out dangerous wildfires started by local residents. Some of you may be thinking, but Mara, I've been walking here in Schmeeckle Reserve for the past 5, 10, maybe 30 or more years, and I've never seen a fire here. Well, things in the past were very different than they are now. The reserve looked different, and local residents also weren't as careful with fire. To investigate this more, I looked into some fire reports. And the first fire report I found talked about a wildfire that happened here in Schmeeckle Reserve in 1956. This fire started near the Granite Trail. The Granite Trail used to be a road. Michigan Avenue behind us wasn't here. And that road was one of the main roads in and out of town, so it was fairly busy. One of these days, someone carelessly threw a cigarette butt out of their window, and it caught on fire near the corner of where that old Reserve Street, it was called, met with North Point Drive. And this fire took and started spreading south and east. And it burned about 51 acres of the reserve. Luckily, with our school being very heavily emphasized in natural resources, we had some conservation students who were able to help put the fire out. Now you would think after one wildfire, the local residents might be a little more cautious. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. About 10 years later, another wildfire started. It was near the same area, but instead of being started by a cigarette butt, it was started by a campfire. Camping isn't allowed in Schmeeckle Reserve, but some college students don't follow the rules, as we know. And their campfire was out of control. To help stop it, the conservation students from the college built these ridges, or these fire breaks. This is an aerial photo. You can't tell, but the ridges create a fully connected circle, and that shape perfectly matches up with the shape of the fire. This fire burnt 21 acres, but because of these fire breaks, they were able to help put it out quicker. The way the fire breaks work is that it helps to create physical distance between where the fire would be and where it could spread. So by creating these ridges, they're disturbing and interrupting the vegetation that's found there, and having more exposed soil, which is harder to catch on fire. So by creating these fire breaks, they were able to help put out the wildfire. I didn't think I'd say this, but we just solved our second mystery. I don't want to doubt your investigation skills, but so far you're better than me. But we still have one more oddity left to discover. So if we could read our third clue.
There are 5 of us that are great, and together we make homes. There is one of me here at Schmeeckle Reserve that many critters consider home. What am I?
For those of you that aren't able to read the clue card, there's something unique about this clue. The word homes, I think, might be an acronym because it's all in capital letters. So I think each letter in the word homes spells something out, that each letter means something. So keep that in mind as we walk to our last location. We'll let this group go for us. We'll read the last clue one more time.
Yeah. There are 5 of us that are great, and together we make homes. There's one of me here at Schmeeckle Reserve that many critters consider home. What am I?
Is anyone able to figure this one out? This one's really tricky. I thought this was the trickiest clue that I found. I think, as we were walking here, I think I solved what the HOMES acronym stood for. I think it stood for the Great Lakes. There's Lake Huron, Ontario, so on and so on. And it says there's one of us here in Schmeeckle Reserve, but we don't have a Great Lake in Schmeeckle. We do have a lake, so I think it's the lake. Schmeeckle Reserve is known for its picturesque views of Lake Jonas, but without one vital piece of evidence, it wouldn't have been created. Don't worry, you heard me right. I said it wouldn't have been created. That means that Lake Jonas is a man-made lake. Now, the piece of evidence I'm talking about is a conversation that happened between 2 people here in Stevens Point. The first person was Sherman Dreyfus. He was a former chancellor at the university and later became a governor of Wisconsin. And he really wanted to make the campus more attractive. And the one way he thought he could do that was by making a lake. But how many have you built a lake before? Anyone? Me either. And that's probably because it takes a lot of money and effort to build a lake. I'm not talking about hundreds of dollars, not even thousands. I'm talking about millions of dollars to build one lake. Dreyfus knew this, and he thought, well, maybe we'll do it in the future. Around the same time that he had this thought, Century Insurance decided that they wanted to put their headquarter building here in Stevens Point. When they built their building, they wanted to build it on a hill. How many of you have lived in central Wisconsin for a while? What's one thing we don't have many of here? Hills. So they had a problem. Dreyfus heard about their problem, and he thought it was a perfect opportunity to have a conversation. So he went to Century Insurance, and he said, look, I want to build a lake, and you want to build a hill. If we work together, all of the dirt that we dig up to build this lake, you can build it and put it under Century Insurance. Century thought that that was a great idea. So, in 1975, they started excavating the lake. And 1 year later, it's the dirt that they put under the building. But a year later, they finished digging the whole lake. But there's something strange about this photo. It says that the lake is finished, but there's something missing from this photo. Does anyone see what's missing? We have the lake behind us. Might give us a clue. Any ideas? Well, I know I put my contacts in this morning for sure. But I don't know about you. I see an island. Does anyone else see that island? I don't see it here though. Well, they made a mistake when they were digging the lake. They took out too much dirt. And Century didn't know what to do with it. So they went to Dreyfus and said, what do we do with all this extra dirt? Dreyfus said, well, I guess we can make an island. And that's what they did. Once the lake was fully built, the water started rising from the ground. It's a groundwater-fed lake. People started swimming in the lake. I love swimming in the summer, and it's a perfect location because it's right next to the campus. It's right next to Stevens Point. Perfect area to swim. But swimming here caused some problems. The trees wouldn't grow on the shoreline. The grasses wouldn't grow. A lot of erosion was happening. It just wasn't good. It didn't make the lake look attractive like Dreyfus wanted. So in 1977, they put a moratorium or a rule in place that banned swimming in this lake. Most people followed that rule and stopped swimming. And after a while, we started uncovering some strange things in the lake. We found swimsuits, more swimsuits than I thought were possible to lose. We found full 6-packs of beer, empty kegs, and just about anything else you might find lost at a swimming beach. Another strange thing I investigated and discovered was a buried car. A buried car? Strange, I know. Well, on the north side of the lake, right down this trail, there was a car left on this property, and it was really rusted, really old, and we didn't have enough money to build the lake, so we didn't have enough money to remove the car either. So what did we do with it? We buried it, and it's still there today on the north side of the lake. I think we solved all of our oddities. This is really exciting. But I want to be honest, those weren't all of the oddities here in Schmeeckle Reserve. As we walk back to where we first met, I want you to think about something you may have seen within the reserve that made you wonder, what is that? Why is it there? How did it get there? Okay, follow me. Did anyone think of their own oddity that they would like to share? Anything that made them wonder why it was there, how did it get there?
You all looked in the tube, didn't you?
Like I said at our last stop, those weren't the only oddities found here in Schmeeckle Reserve. There are oddities still popping up every day. For example, there was another spring-tooth harrow found right behind the old amphitheater area about 2 years ago. We're still learning about oddities every day. I've been working as a Schmeeckle Reserve detective for the past 3 years, and in only 45 minutes, you all managed to solve my whole case for me. That's amazing. I never thought I'd be able to solve it. It turns out I just needed help. Well, before we leave today, I'd like to promote you all to honorary Schmeeckle Reserve detectives. And in order to do that, I need you to raise your right hand and take an oath with me. I, honorary Schmeeckle Reserve detective,
I, honorary Schmeeckle Reserve detective,
solemnly swear
to
continue learning about Schmeeckle Reserve oddities.
Schmeeckle Reserve oddities.
Thank you all again for helping me solve my investigation, and I hope you have a good rest of your evening.